is Caleb Brown, and today I will be talking about the evolution of video game consoles. Alright. If you go way back when to 1967, it's really old. Everybody in this room wasn't even born then. Maybe, but I'm not sure. Back in 1967, the first ever video game console was introduced. The first home console, I should say, actually, because back after World War II, back in the 1940s, we were actually taking old military missiles simulations and turning those into very predated video games. Nothing like today. But with 1967 came the very first video game console, and it was coined the brown box. It was coined the brown box because it was exactly what it sounds like. It was brown, and it looked like a box. After the wild success of this video game system in 1972, Magnavox actually copyrighted the game and then came out with a more updated version, with a more updated version called the Odyssey. And this was even more popular than the brown box. 1975 to 1977, Pong hits arcade. Biggest video game ever. You don't know what Pong is? I'm sorry. Pong hits arcades and it is wildly successful. Magnavox keeps improving. Magnavox keeps making and improving on the consoles that they have. So within that 2-year span, Magnavox would actually come out with 8 new consoles, only just variations of the last one, slightly improving graphics, gameplay, operating systems. Atari would introduce the Atari 2600, which allowed you to play Pong at home, actually, because when Pong was first released, it was released as an arcade game, and then with the wild success of Pong, they made it so you could take it home and you could play it as a console game. Coleco and RCA would also come out with their first systems, but with the success of Magnavox, the Atari, and Pong going to Atari, Coleco and RCA didn't do too well in the first years. From 1978 to 1980, Nintendo hits the scene with their first video game system. Not the NES, but that's coming. But they actually come out with something called the Color TV game series. And it's 4 different systems, and they all only played one game. One was driving, there was a shooting game, fighting game, just different games. Coleco would come out with 5 consoles, only capable of one type of game, just like the TV game series. They'd come out with a game that allowed you to play different shooting games, different racing games, different fighting games. They could only play one genre depending on which one you had. Intellivision would also create their first video game system. And then 1981 to 1985 is the golden age of video games because the original Nintendo Entertainment System and the Sega were first introduced. So with that, with the wild success of the NES and the Sega, Coleco would actually make their very last video game console in this span of 4 years. 1986 to 1990, Sega and Nintendo are still fighting over dominance over the video game market, and Sega actually comes out with the Sega Genesis / Mega Drive. And with that, 2 years later, Super Nintendo would come out. So they're just kind of going back and forth, just trying to outsell each other in video game systems. So then, to respond to the Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis would actually make Sega would actually make the Sega Mega Drive 2. And then, along with both of these companies still kind of fighting over who would control the video game series, Atari would come out with the 7800, which was impressive for Atari because it was double the power, double the graphics. It was better than any console they've made, but with the Super Nintendo, the Sega Genesis / Mega Drive, and the Sega Mega Drive 2, they just couldn't really keep up with it. 1991 to 1993, video game cartridges are now being made into CD format discs, and one of the first systems to actually try and use this was the Philips CDI. And the Philips CDI would bring CD games, but it could have been a very successful game besides the fact that there were many glitches with the games, the controls were very hard, and there was a limited game selection. So naturally, the Philips CDI just kind of failed. But that doesn't mean that CD-based games would fail. And And then Atari would make their own CD-based game, or not CD-based game, their own CD-based console as well with the Atari Jaguar. Also did not do as well, but it did much better than the Philips CDI. The Philips CDI was in it was in circulation for only a few years due to failures. It was taken off the market quick, while the Atari Jaguar stayed on much longer. 1994 to 1997, the PlayStation 1's introduced. PlayStation 1 comes out with their first, or not PlayStation 1, PlayStation comes out with their first system, which introduces the CD format, and they've just done it better than anybody so far at the time. With the Atari Jaguar failing and the Philips CDI, PlayStation succeeded where they had failed because they not only came out with games that were more popular and more adaptable, but they also had easier controls with the game, and the graphics were just much superior with, I believe it was 3 years? Yes, with 3 years more of experience to go with. During this time, Sega would come out with their Sega Genesis 2 and 3. The Sega Genesis 2 and 3 weren't widely popular though due to Sega coming out with the Sega Saturn. The Sega Saturn was Sega's way of coming out with a CD-based game console. And at the same time, Nintendo would come out with the Virtual Boy 3D, which was, if you've ever seen it, it's basically the older version of the Oculus Rift. It was just a stand and it had a little goggles on it, and you look into it and have a little slide and you play your game like that. Nintendo 64 would also come out in this span of time. The Nintendo 64 was one of the first games to introduce the Rumble Pack, and the Rumble Pack is still being used today, but a little more innovated since then. But the Rumble Pack basically just gave action to the controller, so when in-game, if something happens, your controller would actually shake or mimic a player's like their heartbeats and stuff like that. It just go along with the game, so it gave players such a more immersive gameplay. And then 1998 to 2004, Sega would come out with the Sega Dreamcast, and then the PlayStation 2 would come out. Xbox, the original Xbox, would come out with online capabilities. It wasn't the first game to create online capabilities, but it was the first one to successfully get it to work. GameCube would also come out, and with Nintendo, PlayStation, Nintendo, PlayStation, and Xbox coming out, there wasn't really any more systems from newer companies coming out. There were a few, but didn't do too well because of the big three. From 2005 to 2011, there's the Xbox 360, PS3, and the Wii. The Wii was innovative because it brought motion to gaming with their Motion Plus controllers, and then PS3 would try and do the same thing with the Move, but Xbox 360 made an innovative move by doing the Kinect, which was a hands-free kind of moving game. From 2012 to now, we now have the new gen, which is the PS4, the Xbox One, and the Wii U. All three of these consoles have, not recently, well they have recently come out, but not like a month ago, but they've all just come out and they're the top of the line. They have unreal graphics, amazing control. It's just, we've come a long way since 1967 in boxes. So that was my speech. Thanks for being here.